Yo, it's me, Captain Gold, and you're watching yet another gold standard beginner's guide to Project Zomboid. In this particular guide, I'll be teaching you all that you need to know about food and water in Project Zomboid. So take a seat as I'll be showing you how to keep your fat ass fed and hydrated during the zombie apocalypse. The most crucial aspect of self-sustainability in Project Zomboid is agriculture. Through farming, you can produce not only a renewable food source, but you also unlock the ability to reliably garner bait for fishing and trapping. If you're looking to survive into the winter and beyond, you must learn to master this valuable skill set. That being said, keep in mind that this guide will be focused on the current build of the game, being Build 41. According to the devs, Project Zomboid will be greatly expanding the farming mechanic in the future release of Build 42. I'll be covering some of those planned changes at the end of this section. Be that as it may, let's begin with the farming skill itself. Leveling farming is actually super easy, and the skill itself is rather useless. When you level up farming, you just gain more information about your crops. You don't get an increase in crop yields, you don't get to make them more resilient to disease or cold weather. All you get is extra information. Now here's a visual demonstration of the difference between level 1 in farming and level 8 in farming. The utility granted by this skill, insofar as Build 41 is concerned, is rather minimal, which means you don't really have to worry about your farming skill. You can start farming whenever you want and it'll be insanely beneficial for you. So how do you start a farm? First of all, make sure you have some seed packets. There are currently 7 seed packets in Vanilla Zomboid, which allow you to plant 7 different crops. You can find seed packets in sheds, warehouses, and farming goods stores. But before you can plant any crops, you first need a trowel or pickaxe. You can dig furrows into dirt, after which you can then sow whichever seeds you please. But if you want to start a farm on concrete or on a roof, you'll need a shovel and a sack. The shovel, or even a trowel, will collect dirt and place it into a sack. Each stack holds 4 tiles worth of dirt. Now you just take your dirt and pour it wherever you'd like. Then you can dig furrows into those tiles and plant your crops. That said, you will occasionally get a free worm from digging up dirt and furrows. And worms can be used to catch birds or can be used as bait for fishing. Also, keep in mind that crops can be infected with diseases, and diseases can spread. You can prevent the spread by placing your plots in this ugly as fuck and spatially inefficient pattern, because diseases only spread to adjacent tiles. But you don't have to do this. Simply keep an eye on your crops by right-clicking your plots and selecting the crop info option. This will tell you, regardless of your farming level, if your crops are infected or not. This is also how you can determine whether or not your crops need water. By the way, watering crops is easy as hell. Just grab a container with water, right-click, and select the option to water. Always go with full if possible. That being said, if a crop is infected, simply remove it and then replace the crop. Also, it would be pretty smart to keep your farm Zed-free, as the undead will ruin your crops. Whether it be through trampling them out of existence or tainting them with their blood, you don't want your farms exposed to biters. Now, if you would like to cure your crops of diseases, simply follow these instructions. Now, I know I'm being a little bit lazy here, but I generally don't spend time fighting disease, as the spread can easily be stopped by paying attention to your crops and removing sick plants.
What's 17 more years? I can always start again. Make another kid.
Do you want your crops to grow faster? Just utilize fertilizer. Each NPK fertilizer has 4 uses, meaning that you can use one bag on 4 separate plots. And if you build a composter and place rotten food into it, you'll gain compost over time. Simply grab an empty sack to collect the compost, which can then be used as a homegrown fertilizer. Crops go through growing phases, and crops also tend to have different growing phases as well, as shown on screen. If you want more seeds, you want to wait until the seed-bearing phase. Now, if you want the most out of a harvest, wait until the blooming or ready-to-harvest phase. Of the 7 crops you can currently plant, cabbages, potatoes, and carrots are the absolute best. Cabbages have high calories, good hunger satisfaction, are fast to grow, and can be used as bait for many traps. Potatoes are excellent for hunger relief, and they also last a long-ass time before going stale. So just throw them into a freezer and you'll have long-lasting perishable reserves. And carrots are the best for trapping rabbits. All other crops are great for adding some variety to your cooked meals, which will yield positive benefits for boredom and sadness relief. Strawberries in particular can be eaten raw to reduce unhappiness, so long as they're fresh. The best fridge for keeping large frozen reserves would be the icebox fridge. Always have one in your base if it's possible to obtain one. And even though it ought to be obvious, I should mention that crops do grow at a much slower pace during the winter. All of that being said, the developers at Indie Stone are planning on adding some new farming features in the upcoming Build 42 release. As of the recording and publishing of this video, we do not know when this build will be released. Be that as it may, the devs want to add growing seasons to the game and add more crops and herbs as well. Farm animals will also be added, so there will certainly be new skills to learn for animal husbandry. There will also be more changes to the actual process of farming, like potatoes no longer needing seeds to be planted. And there will also be more pest control challenges that you'll have to deal with as a farmer. Given these changes, it's important to note that the fundamentals of farming will still be the same. If anything, all that's being added is complexity and quality of life changes. If you're going to survive in the long run, you're going to need nutrient-rich meat. Crops will not be enough to keep your weight at a healthy level. That is, unless you're okay with spending most of your day eating copious amounts of cabbages and potatoes. That being said, one needs to engage in trapping or fishing to get some meat. There are 5 craftable traps in vanilla Zomboid, with only one trap being obtainable only by looting. In order to craft these traps, one must have read the appropriate skill magazines. Once you learn these recipes, in order to craft these bad boys, simply enter your crafting menu and navigate your way to this section. Traps must be placed 75 tiles away from you in order for them to function. You can check them every hour, and there will always be a visual indication if these traps have managed to catch an animal. Keep in mind, traps aren't perfect. Sometimes the animal will get away with your bait. Traps can also break over time, except for the mouse trap. Any trap with an animal inside them will attract nearby biters. So be careful when checking your traps and when placing them as well. As you level up your trapping skill, your chances of catching an animal per trap is actually increased. Now, as it is with crops, traps will have reduced chances of catching animals during winter months. Setting all of that aside, when you catch an animal, you'll need to butcher it. Simply grab a blade and butcher the dead animal in order to get some fresh meat.
Wow, that is delicious. Finally, some good fucking food.
Take a minute to study this chart, which illustrates what animals can be caught via trapping and which traps work for each animal, along with which bait is actually effective. Feel free to come back to this guide if you need a solid reference, or just visit the Zomboid wiki page for trapping. If you want free XP in trapping, get your hands on the Exposure Survival Episode 6 VHS tape. That or watch it on Life and Living. Whereas trapping and farming is largely passive, fishing is an active hunt for food. In order to start fishing, you're going to need a fishing rod or a spear. You're going to need bait or a tackle. Now you can use bugs, worms, or maggots as bait, if you don't have a fishing tackle. You can get bait fish via a fishing net trap, which you place in water to catch bait fish over time. You also can craft a fishing rod, twine lines, and nets so long as you read the correct skill magazines. And yes, your fishing level improves your fishing yields. Now what's interesting is that when you fish, you can also catch random items instead of actual fish. When you do catch a fish, you're gonna have to butcher it, the same way you would with an animal that was caught via trapping. Now the best time to fish is from 4 a.m. till 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. until 9 p.m., so basically dusk or dawn. And the best months to fish are from March until October. Believe it or not, fishing in the winter will yield very few results. Since fishing is an active choice instead of a passive gain, you need to make sure the opportunity cost is worth it. And if you determine that this cost is worth it, you're gonna have to make sure that your fishing location is safe prior to fishing. Okay, the last thing you wanna do is get snuck up on while you're fishing. With all that said, if you want free XP in fishing, grab yourself the Exposure Survival Episode 1 and 2 tapes. Nothing on Earth is more boring than foraging, but this valuable skill can garner you some very useful items, many of which I will not be covering in this guide, as the focus of this guide is the collection of food and water and nothing else. In order to enter foraging mode, simply click here. Keep walking around like a dumbass until you see shit that you want. Notice this little graphic? It'll tell you what biome you're in and will also help you to determine how much daylight is left. Foraging is primarily useful for finding wild eggs, fruits, wild herbs, medicinal plants, mushrooms, and berries. Many berries will be randomly poisonous except for blackberries, blueberries, winterberries, and beauty berries. Holly berries will always be poisonous. All mushrooms can be randomly poisonous. Either read the Herbalist magazine to identify poisonous berries and shrooms or take the Herbalist trait. If you're lucky, you can find some lemongrass, which can help with sickness and food poisoning. Now before you go foraging, consider how long it takes to forage and how much other shit you can find during this act. I personally would not recommend foraging for your food needs. It's honestly better for other items. That said, if your foraging level is higher, you will be finding better items at a faster pace. And you'll also be able to focus on specific item types during your search. If you want free XP in this skill, the Exposure Survival Episodes 5 and 7 will grant you free XP in foraging. Fresh or potable water is vitally important for your survival in Project Zomboid. Luckily for you, it's rather easy to obtain, even when utilities shut off permanently. All toilets and sinks will have a small reservoir of fresh water after water services shut down. Water dispensers hold 250 units of potable water, and you can find them littered throughout the map. Oh, and here's the cool part, you can literally transport them, and those 250 units of potable water, to your base. You can also stock up on fresh water when utilities are still active by filling up as many empty bottles as you can. You can be a bit extra and fill up an indoor rain collector with fresh water as a backup supply. And if you find a well, then you really don't have to worry about water. The supply in a well is basically infinite and it's all drinkable. You can get tainted or non-potable water from rain or bodies of water. Then you can boil said water, and just like that, you have drinkable water. If you plumb a sink to a rain collector, you can instantly turn tainted rainwater into fresh, potable water. To do this, merely place a rain collector above a sink. Grab a pipe wrench and right-click your sink. That's how you can plumb sinks. You can move sinks themselves with a wrench and some carpentry skills. Now this is something I forgot to mention in my base guide, but a plumbed sink has to be in an enclosed structure in order for it to function. That being said, an empty bleach bottle has the most water holding capacity of any bottle, whereas the empty bourbon bottle is the best in terms of volume to weight ratio. All things considered, water scarcity shouldn't really be a problem for you. All you need to know about non-perishables is that canned food requires a can opener. That and that you should consume all perishable food before you go on to eat your non-perishables. What you'll want is a nice stockpile of non-perishable food that'll never expire for your winter months. And it would also be prudent to stock your safe houses with non-perishables as well. You'll never know when you're going to need that extra meal. Anyways, that'll be it for this gold standard beginner's guide for Project Zomboid. If you like this sort of content, please support my channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Don't forget to smash that notification icon as well so that you may be notified when I publish a new video. Also consider leaving a comment, as that does help me with the algorithm. This particular guide was chosen by you, the viewer, via poll. So keep an eye out for future polls. I definitely want to hear from all of you. That being said, I'm Captain Gold and I hope to see you all in my next video.